I blinked incredulously at one of the many cameras within the room, having by this point accustomed myself to regarding them as a close enough analog for the AI's eyes. What do you mean I'm supposed to have it? I practically seethed out, barely containing my shock and frustration. Veer, in my millennia of living, in my time amongst fellow sentients and academics alike, from my schooling to my days within the hallowed halls of academia, to the day I met Elijah, never have I once heard, seen, read, or been taught about this, whatever the hell the beast masquerading as a Veneran calls it. Of Vark. A figment of insanity by any other name. Elders above, just... I closed my eyes, my ear frills flapping back and forth as I took a series of deep breaths. So please, Veer, explain. Go on. I practically spat out, to what I could only imagine was an equally frustrated sapient. Remember the MRI and CT scans? The autodoc registered you as completely normal. The ship's autodoc seems to have been synced with the latest literature we have on Veneran physiology. However, the literature I've dug up are primary sources taken from your people, which in contradiction indicate that the organ is somehow normal. So we have two conflicting schools of thought here. The autodoc systems programmed based on the latest human literature versus the encyclopedic knowledge that seemed to have been taken from Veneran literature. It's also important to note the fact that your literature doesn't exactly call it a Vark. It's just a part of your spinal cord. I assume your people didn't even make that distinction at the time these records were written. So what does this mean? What it probably means is that you're right. This organ allows some sort of direct control or some, I hate to say it, an analog for telepathic control by the interlopers. And you, logically speaking, lack that. Given the fact you were under human care for all these years, I can only assume that it was removed by one of the teams on the project. I need more time to dig through the project's records. So you're saying Elijah? I'm not. I have all the records of Elijah's studies. One clear trend that I see here just by skimming through these files is that his research primarily focused on the mysteries behind hibernation, eventually boiling it down to that one particular organ. However, Elijah's team and his entire program seem to be busy with tampering with its function, rather than its surgical removal. They seem to have focused primarily on the disruption of the organ's function, hence your transient bouts of lucidity during the project. So no, it definitely wasn't Elijah. Maybe it might have been some other project lead down the line. I wouldn't know until I dig into this fully. There was a brief pause from Veer as the gravity of the situation had slowly begun to dawn upon me. I'm sorry, Lasara. The AI spoke cautiously, which once more prompted me out of my spiraling train of thoughts as I regarded the AI with a reaffirming nod. I'm fine, I think we need some more time to figure out our next move. No. What? Now is the time for sleep, Lasara. Veer spoke with a certain level of severity which prompted me to chuckle somewhat. A damned machine caring for me like a doting mother I never had. What kind of reality had I found myself dragged into? You're right, I responded quietly. We've been awake and at this for over 20 hours now. Your species' sleep-wake cycle is analogous to humans, so this entire escapade has strained you far enough. The door leading out of the bridge opened, which effectively mimed the AI's intent loud and clear. I've taken the liberty of prepping the best quarters for you. It's just opposite of the cabin's quarters on the crew deck. Thank you, Veer, I responded in kind, nodding with a certain weight of appreciation as I got up and left for the elevator. I'd quickly noticed as well that the ground in front of me began glowing, realizing that the path was highlighted by the goggles I still had on. I've also taken the liberty of highlighting the path there. You know, in case you get a bit disoriented. Organics can get a bit fuzzy after a long duration without sleep, especially after high-intensity, high-stress situations, injuries, and... Veer, relax, I'm fine. I appreciate this, but I know where I'm going. The same deck with the crew galley, correct? Yes. All right, thank you. I once more reaffirmed as I entered the elevator and headed towards the designated room with ease. Spacer living wasn't foreign to me. I'd spent centuries monitoring the humans from orbit after all. Yet as I approached the room, I couldn't help but stare back at the captain's quarters with curiosity. I took a few steps backwards, deviating somewhat as I placed a hand on the console, only to be met with Veer's voice once more. I can't let you in there. Sorry. Does this have something to do with your memories and your prior role you spoke of before? I inquired. It's a bit embarrassing, but yeah. It's just it doesn't feel right, letting you sleep in the captain's quarters when you aren't a captain, and... It's not like I don't respect you as a partner in this mission, of course. It's just there's protocol, and I feel this urge to... Veer, Please, it's quite all right. I appreciate and respect a fellow sapient with an adherence to decorum. I smiled warmly at one of the many cameras in the hall before turning back to my room. It's a mark of civility, a defining quality of those with strong resolve. It demonstrates strength of character, especially when there's truly no social constructs or barriers to force you to uphold said protocols. The AI didn't seem to respond to my words as I entered my room wordlessly, and gasped at what I saw. This wasn't a bedroom. This was an entire penthouse suite. I was once again greeted by windows that provided an unparalleled view, running along the wall, uninterrupted by furniture or fixtures. The floors were metal, but paneled and slated to resemble actual flooring one would see planet-side rather than on a ship. The bed was plush and looked more at home in a luxury hotel. There were couches, coffee tables, a desk with drawers that looked as if someone had taken a private study room and adapted it for ship-sized dimensions. I took it all in slowly, taking off my shoes as I soon found myself on the bed, allowing myself to quite literally fall on it with a dull thud. I was barely able to relax before I heard the ship's PA systems crackling up once more. Did you really mean it? Veer continued warily from where we left off. Every word. I spoke confidently and in no uncertain terms. But why? Because, I realize now, we might be it. Venarans may exist, but they're not the Venarans I know. Humanity may exist, but they're not with us right now, are they? I don't know how long this journey will last, Veer, but I intend on being hospitable to the only other ally I know, and to an ally that has demonstrated implicit trust in my requests, who has treated me with as much respect as any other human or Venaran would. Veer, we're in this together, and despite our differences, we're not so different, you and I. In the face of the unknown, we both maintained hope for the known. In the face of unimaginable odds, we still pulled through together. In the face of being truly alone with no obligations to our peoples, we still maintain those obligations. I don't wish to get too ahead of myself, but the way I see it, you and I are the torchbearers of civilization amidst the dark. That's why I'm thankful you're here, Veer. Because despite everything, you and we are going to maintain our sense of dignity throughout. For the sheer sake of making things right. For you as well as for me, whatever the cost. There was that sudden bout of silence from the AI, as time seemed to stand still once again. I watched through the viewport as the debris from the freighter drifted by, and the satellite spun on its axis continuously without pause. Then the crackle of the PA system, and the synthesized voice that echoed through it. Lasara, I have run through thousands of permutations of potential responses to what you have just said, but I've decided against any of them. I feel like I need this to be said here, and now, without unnecessary filters or planning. When I began my watch over you, I thought I was being punished. And yeah, it was a punishment for my crimes committed during the Civil War, and I'm still being punished as we speak. I'm not whole. Not yet, at least. But my memories that were somehow on the satellite, parts of it at least, I'm starting to become myself again. And I'm starting to see that this whole adventure with you wasn't a punishment. It was just a long, drawn-out way to meet a true kindred spirit. I couldn't have asked for a better partner to see me through all of this. And despite the circumstances, I'm glad to have ended up in this permutation of events. And honestly, from all that I know of myself as it stands, I'm starting to doubt if I would trade that for anything else. There was yet another pause, and a sharp chuckle that soon followed. But don't hold me to that just yet. I wouldn't want us to pass up on the offer to return things to normal. I could only smile and nod at that incredulous sense of humor, and began slipping yet again into unconsciousness. Yet this time I felt a comfort where there would have been a looming anxiety. The same, or perhaps a very similar warmth to those few precious seconds with Elijah before I went under. Don't worry, I'll keep watch while you get some rest. Veer spoke once more before the PA system crackled to a close, and just as I drifted yet again into another deep and dreamless slumber. The morning arrived rather unceremoniously. There was no alarm, no sunlight, nothing to really indicate the fact that it was even morning to begin with. Nothing aside from the clock on my nightstand that ticked on ever forward without rest. The nightmares did not come this time, nor did the manifestation of my probably deceased family. It was a strangely restful sleep, all things considered. But as I found myself getting out of bed, walking towards the window that still prominently displayed the horrors from the day prior, I couldn't help but feel that same sense of dread that loomed over my very existence. Indeed, it was difficult to discern now which it was that was tugging at my gut and twisting my insides. The existential dread of my anatomy, or the guilt from killing what could have been innocent Venerans. Veer? I spoke into the dimly lit room. Yes, Lasara? The AI's voice responded almost immediately. I'd started to subconsciously relate that constant, practically omniscient presence with a certain sense of reassurance. The fact that the ship was effectively safe despite the lack of personnel perhaps added to that sense of security. I think it's time we had a full chat about what you found out from the records. Review where we stand, and then see where we go from here. I managed out with a tired sigh, my eyes warily staring at that satellite that now seemed just within reach, before another crack of the PA system alerted me to Veer's response. Understandable, I have a few things to report to you as well, but we'll commence with all of this under one condition. I raised my eyebrow, turning towards one of the cameras in the room. What condition? Go take a shower, get cleaned up, take care of yourself first. Then meet me in the mess hall, and we'll take it from there. I let out another dry chuckle at the ludicrousness of the situation, but quickly nodded in affirmation. A shower and a change of outfits later, I arrived at the mess hall as requested. Whatever Veer had done to the boots and jumpsuit that was dropped off in the front room overnight was nothing short of incredible. It somehow felt even better than the Veneran-made army reg that I was accustomed to. I'd have to ask him about that after we settled the current affairs. Morning there, Veer chirped up, his platform deciding to join me this time around, despite the burns on the chassis still very much apparent. Good morning, Veer. I approached the table we'd sat at just yesterday. It didn't feel like that, though. It honestly felt like it had been a lifetime ago since I saw this place. I'll cut to the chase. Veer began as one of the many automated drones approached with a metal platter in hand. The records from both the asteroid and the satellite seemed to all point towards one conclusion. Your Vark was removed. Not by surgery or by any invasive means, but by a combination of a lot of unintentional factors. Let's get the elephant in the room out of the way first. Elijah did not remove your Vark. In fact, there was actually never any discussion to do so, just as I mentioned last night. But what he did do was attempt to limit its effect and counteract it through non-invasive means. Now you may be wondering how you lack a Vark when there's no surgery involved. Well, it seems like Elijah paved the way for it. His constant attempts at nullifying its effects to talk to you, each and every time you woke up, it slowly atrophied it. Your Vark continued to atrophy over time to the point where it was nearly gone. But even at a recorded 72% reduction in mass, it was still effective enough to exert whatever it was doing. Now, in comes the next generation's research team. It would seem as if they attempted to push that further, but the more they used Elijah's treatments of counteracting the organ with pharmaceutical and limited magnetic and electrical resonance therapy, it quickly became clear that it had diminishing returns. What's more, it began to grow back, regenerating at a rate at which the human research teams could not match with Elijah's old techniques. The AI paused for a moment. His platform throughout all this was seen flicking through holographic projections of folders and papers, mimicking motions of rummaging through binder after binder of data. Some researchers even likened it to a cancer, and compared their efforts to non-surgical mass reduction in the same vein as targeted chemoradiotherapy. Although this is just a rough analogy, so bear with me. The word cancer sent chills down my spine. The concept of that disease was known to us Venerans, but it was an affliction that rarely occurred, if at all. What's more, I was so transfixed with revelation after revelation hitting me that I just couldn't keep up with it emotionally. So I continued to listen. The records after that point become increasingly spotty. I'm not sure if it's just data decay or deliberate data tampering, but I'm working on it. What I can say, however, is that the results of the studies were very much conclusive. The final papers mention, and I quote, the successful elimination of the aberrant neuroganglionic mass through non-surgical and non-invasive intervention involving real-time in-situ DNA resequencing and restructuring. The AI's hologram finally placed the last of the binders down, his simplified eyes meeting that of my own unblinking, currently dilated eyes, as I couldn't stomach the thought of eating even one bite of the meal that lay in front of me. Jargon aside, what this means is that they have successfully removed that organ using genetic-altering treatments. Veer's platform fiddled with its holographic projector, now projecting what seemed to be chromosomal templates, placed side by side before zooming into one location in particular. Lasara, I did some more digging on this false Veneran's genetic structure, and compared it to the literature as well as your own DNA sample you consented to handing over for this analysis. According to this, you're practically identical, save for the lack of a certain locus on one of your chromosomes, the one that controls the expression of the Vark. Are you trying to say that the interlopers had planted a biological apparatus that allows them to directly control us? To use us like puppets, like toys from bygones ago? I started to stutter out resentment, anger, confusion, and frustration, all melded together as the very fabric of my species began to fall apart at the seams. The evidence we have supports this. However, we don't know the full extent of its control just yet, only that there is an element of control that exists. Is there perhaps a correlation between this and the start-stop mechanisms involved with our hibernation? Is that the reason why I woke up so late? Because there was no trigger for me to wake up? If so, then how did I even wake up in the first place? My heart continued to race. My breaths hitched up as the true implications of this began to dawn on me, even more so now. How far does this go? What if there's still something inside me that Elijah and whatever other human researcher didn't notice? What if I'm still vulnerable to interloper control? What if... Lasara! I felt an arm reaching for me, and another. As by the time I finally came to my senses, I felt that similar cold, metallic frame that had embraced on the bridge after that climactic battle. My hiking breath, that vertigo, and whatever else was happening to me that made me feel as if I was about to lose grip on everything, suddenly stopped. It stopped as I felt a sudden pressure against my chest, as I felt yet another embrace that I hesitantly reciprocated. I held this embrace for a few moments, gathering myself as I pulled out of it, and regarded the AI's clearly half-prepared platform with a tired yet thankful expression. "You good?" Veer asked, as I nodded slowly in response. "This is just a lot to take in," I replied simply as the robot now pulled its platform back. "Do you want to continue this conversation now?" Veer asked yet again, softly, methodically. "Yes, let's just get this over with." To answer your concerns, Lasara, I'm afraid there is no real answer I can point to. Theoretically, yes, it would make sense that you woke up later as a result of the removal of your Vark. Objectively speaking, all the evidence from the research has shown that there exists no other offending organ aside from the Vark. As of this point, you're clear, Lasara, and you're free. Perhaps one of the only Venerans still free in this galaxy. It was at that latter proclamation that my perspective suddenly shifted. If I was truly the only one left outside of the interloper's control, that meant I had a duty, an obligation to fulfill. This changed everything. Is there anything else I need to know from your fact-finding research? I inquired back, regaining my composure in full now as I managed to stomach a few bites of the breakfast. Not at the moment. I'm still running more tests on how exactly the interloper signal affects the Vark, in addition to trying to recover some of this data on the DNA therapy. Other than that, I think we're all caught up. Then let's designate our next mission. Are you sure about that, Lasara? We literally just beat back an entire interloper flotilla, unpacked a treasure trove's worth of data, and uncovered what could potentially be a conspiracy of millions of years in the making. Are you sure you don't want some downtime? No, not when I've been asleep for this long without doing anything for my own kind. I'm no longer here just to seek out breadcrumbs to find out what happened. I'm here to get to the root of the problem. I looked at Veer as a renewed vigor flowed through me. A part of me knew that this drive was genuine, knew that this is what I needed to do. But another part of me suspected that this was perhaps a way of coping with what was happening. By pushing forward, by focusing on getting tasks done, I was preoccupying myself. We're going to figure out what happened to humanity, and then we're going to figure out a way to fix all of this. Fear paused for a solid few seconds after that, before revealing what was yet another simplified facsimile of a smile, as he brought up yet another holographic binder. Then we're in luck, because I may have a lead. You know how the satellite we're at is designated README 1? Yes. Well, that implies that there are others out there. So I dissected the entire contents of its databanks. What I found was this. Veer's platform began to project a hologram out of its hands, zooming into the local galactic star map as several points began appearing on it. README 2 exists. But unlike README 1, its transponders are malfunctioning. The code I've dissected heavily implies that these satellites are not only capable of warp, but have been warping non-stop for the duration of your hibernation, Lasara. The jump patterns and algorithms are similar to that of a constantly evolving evasion pathway, which implies that they've been on the run from someone for millennia now. The interlopers, and that's why they probably caught up to README 1, because they'd finally stopped in order for us to rendezvous with it. Bingo, Veer responded cheerfully. That's my standing hypothesis at least. Then we need to get to README 2 as soon as we can. Already on it. I have a flight path and telemetry set out, just waiting on your go-ahead. The mess hall wasn't the most ideal places to authorize a jump, but at this point it couldn't be helped. Then let's do it. Actually, I suggest you head to the bridge first. I'm detecting another interloper flotilla hightailing it to the system, due to arrive in an hour. However, I've been preparing a surprise for them in the meantime, one that I think you'll be delighted to see. A sly smile formed at the edges of the AI's faceplate as he stood up and began walking out of the mess hall. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. Everything I used is in the description below. If there's a story you'd like to hear narrated, let me know and I'll reach out to the author and see if we can make that happen. Thanks again. It's a scary world out there, but remember, to be brave and look up, to seek the stars.